Investors obsess over things like earnings per share, PE ratios, dividend yields. But here's the truth. None of all of that matters if the revenues are not rising. Because without top-line growth, profits, dividends, and valuations mean absolutely nothing. In this video, I'll show you exactly why revenue growth is the most important signal of a healthy business, far more reliable than earnings per share or any valuations. By the end, you'll learn how to separate real growth companies from value traps. Welcome to the channel, friends. In today's video, I'm going to split it up into 5 parts. And I'm going to be using my iPad to do some drawings as well, so let's go straight in. So the first thing is, revenue is the foundation. And what I mean by that is, if I was to draw a picture of a house, you've got the ground over here, and then you've got the walls, excuse my drawing, and then you've got the roof, you've got the doors, you've got the windows, etc. And what I'm saying is, the revenue is the foundation. This is important because everything else doesn't really matter if the foundation is not there. If that foundation is not there, you can't build a stable wall. You can't have good earnings per share. You can't have any of the other good metrics, because if your underlying foundation is not good, then that company will crumble. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. And an example that I wanted to give to you is an example of Kraft Heinz. If you have a look at this stock, by the way, I got this data from the website Finviz. It's a really good website, so check out the link in the description below if you want to access it and try it out for yourself. But if you have a look here, you've got 3 main metrics. You've got earnings per share, you've got the sales, and you've got the shares outstanding. We're not going to be talking about the shares outstanding in this video, but the first thing that you might have noticed is that the earnings per share has been in a general uptrend with Kraft Heinz. But if you have a look at the sales, it's flat, or if anything, it might even be decreasing towards the end over here. So over the years, the actual earnings per share, which investors really like to look at, has been increasing, but the revenues have just been flat. And how does that translate into the price of the stock itself? Well, the price of the stock is in this direction. So that's why it's very important to look at the sales, the actual revenue that the company makes, rather than anything else. Point number 2, rising sales are a sign of healthy business. Why is that? When customers keep buying more again and again, it's a sign that the company is doing something right. There's a reason usually behind it. So if you look at Apple, for example, people buy iPhones all the time. And you could argue, is it because of the phone itself? No, like sometimes Android phones, they have better hardware and things inside the phone itself. But it's things like the iOS software that's so sticky. Once people actually enter that ecosystem, it's very difficult to get out. They buy things again and again and again. And that's why Apple has such a big recurring revenue. On the flip side to that, if you don't really like something, then it's easy for you to change certain things. So for example, back in the day, a lot of people used to go to the cinemas to watch a movie. But nowadays, more people use Netflix compared to actually going to cinemas. So as a result, Netflix sales have exploded, whereas some of these cinema stocks, a lot of them have filed for bankruptcy. So that's why looking at certain trends is very important. And all of this, it feeds into the actual number of sales that the company makes. And if there's lots of recurring revenue, that means it's a healthy company just by looking at it like that. Point number 3, revenues drive long-term earnings per share and profit. Think of it like this. You've got lots of different metrics out there. You've got earnings per share, you've got PE ratios, you've got so many. Like if you were to go through, if we were to just have a look at this page on Finviz, you've got all of these different metrics if you really wanted to look at all of them. And my point is, you don't really need to start by looking at all of those. You can start very simple. Start by looking at sales. And the reason behind that is because the sales, it drives all these other metrics. The earnings per share growth only lasts if it's backed by real revenue growth. Otherwise, it's just cost cutting or accounting engineering, such as share buybacks and things like that, to bring the earnings per share up until they actually can't do it anymore. And one example I wanted to give you is Hims. Again, this is from Finviz. If you were looking solely at the earnings per share, then it was in a loss for a very long time. It was red. You'd be thinking that Hims is a really bad company. And only recently it became profitable if you were looking at the earnings per share. However, if you were looking at the sales, then it told you a completely different story. What you could see here is exponentially rising sales every single year. And that's why Hims is a company that I have in my portfolio and why I really like Hims as a company. By the way, if you want to see what other stocks I have in my portfolio, sign up to my free weekly newsletter where I provide market updates every single week and I give you an overview of my portfolio in that email as well. The link is in the description below. So my point here is that the rising sales eventually made all of the other metrics go positive. So for example, the earnings per share finally became positive after years of increased sales. And that's why looking at the trend is very important. Point number 4, avoiding value traps. Cheap valuations doesn't necessarily mean that a company is good. A company can have a low PE ratio, a low PEG ratio, whatever you want to have a look at, but if it's not backed by their sales, then it means absolutely nothing. And the next example I want to give you of that is a company called Estée Lauder. If we have a look at this company over here, you could see that their sales was going up, but then over the last couple of years, the sales went down. So the sales were in a downtrend, and as a result, you could see the earnings per share down. So even though certain valuations for this company, such as a price to sale of just 2, makes it sound as though the company is very cheap, the underlying story is the sales are going down. The sales are shrinking, customers are going elsewhere. So that should be a warning sign, and even if you look at the price of the stock itself, you could see it's been in a downtrend. So that's why it's very important to be careful with these sort of value traps. And the final point I want to make is the metrics in order. When looking at a stock, a lot of investors resort to looking at things like PE ratio or the earnings per share or the growth rate over the last 5 years in terms of the earnings per share. But I hope I proved to you in this video that sales drive all the other metrics. So when you actually have a look at a stock, the first thing that you should be doing is actually looking at the sales. And you could easily do this for yourself by just going on the Finviz page, searching for the stock that you're looking at, and just looking at that chart, just like I was showing you, such as this chart over here. It's really that simple. That should be the starting point when actually looking at a stock for yourself. If you ask me personally, I'm very specific in terms of what I look for when I'm buying a stock. So for me, if the sales are in an uptrend, like this over here, then I'm interested. I'll have a look at the stock further. I'll look at some of the other metrics. However, if the trend is not clear, such as if 1 year's sale is slightly lower and then the next is slightly higher, then I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the company. I won't look at it any further. But that's just me personally. I know some people that do look at these sort of companies and then still further investigate it. But for me, with you knowing my situation in the sense that I work full-time as a doctor, I have a family of my own, I simply don't have the time to be wasting looking at these stocks. And I don't mind missing out on some of the stocks that do go very high, that did meet this requirement. But for me personally, I prefer to keep things simple. I want to look at the trend. I want to see how things are going. And then that's my indication whether to look into that stock further or not. If you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate if you subscribe to my weekly newsletter. In this newsletter, I provide market updates and I also tell you what's in my portfolio and things that I'm watching as well. And if you found this video useful, please like and subscribe. And if you don't know who I am and you want to know more about me, then click on this video over here.